This is the Making Waves podcast. My name is Dave Rhoden. We're here with Aaron Aylward, District 6 Representative and leader of the Freedom Caucus of South Dakota. Aaron, welcome.
Hey, Dave. How's it going today?
Now, you're part of the Freedom Caucus. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
For sure. And I appreciate you having me on the podcast, too. I appreciate the work you do, so I just want to start out by saying that.
Thank you.
As far as the Freedom Caucus goes, we've had that now for, this is the third year, the third session that we've had that in South Dakota. And just a little bit about that. So a lot of people are probably familiar with the federal level Freedom Caucus, and it did stem from that. They're in, I want to say their most recent state is, I think it's Maryland. I want to say they're getting close to a dozen now. I know when we started, we were the sixth state Freedom Caucus anyway, but just a little bit on that as far as South Dakota goes. What it is, it's a group of traditionally conservative-minded legislators in South Dakota, and we just, in a matter of what we put in, matter of importance, we put Jesus Christ and Scripture at the top. From there, we put the state and federal constitution, and then the party platform that we have in South Dakota for the Republican Party platform. We use those. We do our best to use those as our guiding, our guiding points when we look at legislation going through session. And it's made up of people, of representatives and senators that are kind of spread throughout the whole state. And we started out with a fairly small crew, and we had a good primary and a general here recently. We've got a pretty good caucus, I'll just say. But that's just a little bit about us anyway.
For clarification, the Freedom Caucus started in the U.S. Congress and Senate, and now they have chapters in state legislatures. Is there some sort of overarching organization which chooses the members of the state chapters, or is it more of like a franchise type situation?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the way they have it set up is, they have their organization in D.C. out there, and the way they work it is they contact, your conservative, liberty-minded legislators in different states that, have proven to have good voting records. And the way that works, and I really don't know if I would call it a franchise or what. I'm not sure what kind of term I could put on it, but the way they work it is, they have what they call state directors, and those are going to be a little bit different depending on the state, but those state directors are, those are employees of the folks out in D.C. Those aren't employed by us, so they get registered as, lobbyists within the state. But what they do is they'll help, assess legislation. They might testify on bills. They might help lobby some stuff, help with like press release type of work, things like that. But they are helping us. But again, they do have that separation. One good area that they've been really good about is they've never come in and said, "Dang it, Aaron, you better do this or else." They've been there to consult. They've been there to help and guide. And if we, as a group here in South Dakota, think something, if we might disagree with something that they propose, they take our advice because they realize we're here in South Dakota, we're the boots on the ground, if you will, and we see it every day. So they've been really good to work with.
They're respectful.
Yeah, yep.
That is a very good explanation. Thank you. Let's move on to what's going on in the legislature. You, of course, are a representative. What would you like to talk about? What's going on in the legislature now?
I'll just start out with kind of the top issues, and you're probably seeing this from the outside a little bit too, but when we went around, and this isn't everybody, but the vast majority of folks, and they were going around talking to people, campaigning, door knocking, that type of deal. The number one thing I think everybody heard was the property tax issue, that property taxes are too high. That's being addressed quite a bit, and we're actually this week and then next week we're going to be hitting that pretty hard. From there, the eminent domain with the pipeline issue with the CO2 pipeline, that's been a big issue, and we passed a really good bill that Representative Carla Lems has. That's over in the Senate now. We passed that through the House, and that would have, protect the threat of eminent domain with anything involving carbon oxide. So that would also include carbon dioxide as well. And then John Carley on the Senate side, he's bringing another good bill. I think it's, and it might be off on this number, but I think it's SB 49. Same type of thought process with protecting people from the eminent domain issue, but it goes into things like, I want to say like the solar stuff, wind turbine stuff, some of that. So it pushes a little harder. And then the third one that I know a lot of people have heard about is the education savings accounts, the school choice, if you will. And that's there is another bill out there right now that Tina Mullally has. There were two kind of two bills kind of that came right out of the gate during session that, you know, had there was a lot of tension and a lot of focus was on them, but those two did end up dying, and those aren't on the table anymore. We'll see how session goes. Those are the main topics. And I'll also mention the new proposed penitentiary in Lincoln County is also kind of a hot topic as well around the Capitol right now.
Well, let's dive into this a little bit. What can you tell us about the bills or any movement that is going to be happening on property taxes? Because you're right, property taxes have skyrocketed, and there's a number of ways that it's skyrocketed. They've increased the assessments on properties, and they've straight up just raised the property taxes. And I'm sure I don't have to explain to you how that's affecting everybody. It's raising everybody's cost of living, and it's jacked up the price of housing. So the houses themselves aren't any particularly more valuable. It's just they've increased by inflation, and that ends up increasing your taxes. So what kind of tax relief for property taxes can we expect?
Yeah, there's been a lot of proposals out there, and we just reached a deadline for releasing bills. So, if people go online and check that out, they'll see everything that's out there. Now, some things could get hog-housed, of course, but as of right now, we're seeing everything from one that I have is kind of focusing on the many sales tax exemptions that we have. So actually striking out one of the major sales tax exemptions and then kind of supplementing that, if you will, with a property tax credit to relieve or to provide some relief on that side. That's one. Some folks are looking at some things that are a little more pinpointed towards the elderly population again, because we have a lot of the older folks that are, on fixed incomes getting pushed out of their homes. So that'll be looked at again. But I tell you what, I think the best idea right now, and I know there's probably a good chunk of people that don't want to hear about another summer study, another task force, because we just had a summer study. But I will say there's a bill proposed by Representative Speaker John Hanson that proposes a task force, and that's a little different because what that'll include, it'll include elected representatives and senators, but it'll also include people from around the state that might have skin in the game that can provide a little more information as far as how it's affecting the day-to-day person. Bringing those types of folks to the table too. The idea with that task force is, hey, we say if we go forward this summer with doing that, at the same time we do need to provide some relief. There's been some ideas out there as far as either putting a complete freeze on until we come out of that task force with a solid idea, or actually moving the property tax rates and everything back to 2020 levels before the COVID stuff, and everything skyrocketed after that. So, but what needs to happen, in my opinion, out of that task force is that whole school funding formula needs to be readdressed. It either needs to be extremely reformed or else completely swapped, and then something else needs to take its place, because anytime we go into adjust assessments or the taxes themselves, we always get feedback from the public schools saying, well, we can't do this because you're gonna hurt us. So it becomes this this kind of teeter-totter deal. It's just not working out. So that's kind of what we're looking at for that.
It seems to me with property taxes, there's multiple levels of government that have input on this.
Yeah.
Property tax assessment happens at the county level. The counties and the school boards, they all are engaged in this. And so you have, since multiple governments are involved, you got essentially too many cooks in the kitchen. And when that happens, there's no overall arching plan about how this should look, and it becomes a mess.
That's a good way to put it, a mess.
Yeah, fair enough.
You're on with that.
Do we just move on just a little bit? The carbon pipeline and property rights and eminent domain?
For sure, yep.
Okay, well, understand Carl Lem's bill, isn't that just one sentence?
Yes, it's a very short bill. I think they came into session with, knowing, rather than using we hear the term shotgun blast approach with a bunch of different bills. They had that sniper rifle tuned in, a solid rifle. They knew what they wanted to do. It's a very short bill. It's to the point. If passed through, it'll be a good thing for South Dakota, the landowners and the farmers around the state. So it's definitely a good thing.
And it says simply that you cannot use eminent domain for carbon capture pipeline.
Yeah, essentially. I mean, if it labels it, and we get the language from the federal government, they use the term carbon oxide. A lot of people were worried right away. They said, "Hey, don't you want to change this to carbon dioxide?" But it's because it's carbon oxide that'll also include, that dioxide as well. So we're okay with that.
Well, I understand. Yeah, you can play with definitions sometimes and get around rules, but yeah, that would be a silver bullet that would end the problem. But I think overall we also need to look at our property rights and eminent domain laws so that those can be straightened out. I was surprised at how weak our eminent domain laws were. How easy it was to use eminent domain compared to other states.
I've heard a few times now Governor Rhoden, back when he was in the legislature, I guess they passed. I think I looked at the old piece of, it's law now, but I think they passed it years ago, and it was supposed to be a big thing, which I believe it was, but we definitely have some work to do.
Well, I'm glad you're working on it. Going on to the next hot topic, the penitentiary. There's one bill to authorize the penitentiary, and what are your thoughts on it?
There's that, and then on the opposite side, I'll just bring up Kevin Jensen. He's done a really good job on the pushing back on the penitentiary issue. He's got I believe a couple pieces of legislation out to just completely pump the brakes on it, create a better task force, if you will, to look at this whole thing and just kind of put things on hold. And in the meantime, that the bill that you mentioned with the funding, that is out there right now, and it seems like more and more day by day that I spend out there, it seems like folks are seeing that, hey, this is a tight year with the budget. There's not a lot of money. Why the heck are we doing this with this big new shiny object? And I just think people are starting to realize, like, hey, this isn't the time to do this. Let's slow it down, maybe reassess the whole situation.
I gather Kevin Jensen has bills that would be an option that would involve studying this issue and having an alternative so that the legislature can vote on moving forward with dealing with the issue that does need to be dealt with, but that does not involve spending $1 billion on a penitentiary that we don't need.
And I will say, from what I've seen with his proposed legislation, it's more so let's reevaluate the situation. And if somebody's out there listening to this that, has more, because I looked at it when he first dropped it, when it first came out, so I might be off on a little piece. So there might be somebody out there that would correct me on that. But I think it's more so, hey, we need to reassess how we go about this, and the spot down in Lincoln County is not the best thing for the people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Weber was on the podcast a couple weeks ago, and he mentioned that there are other alternatives that are less expensive and more appropriate for what we actually need. Because we only have 200 maximum security prisoners in South Dakota, and the facility we have can hold 600. So why are we building a 1,500-person maximum security prison?
Yeah, that adds to the budget concern is obviously one, but to your point, and I'm glad Mr. Weber spoke up and stood out and showed people that stuff, somebody that's credible, that's been in that system for a number of years. And that just adds to the people out there being skeptical of this whole thing.
So where is the penitentiary bill now, the one that would spend the money on the prison in Lincoln County. Where's that at? Is that been scheduled for hearing?
No, I don't believe so. It's still getting kicked around in appropriations. It hasn't had a vote on it yet. We're trying to get more information, so we're in the process of hearing from more people. And people listening to this probably think that's a no-brainer. We're always trying to get more information, but we need to get to a point where we really grill this down. Like, hey, is this actually doable? So we need to have probably a little more in-depth discussions with the DOC and then folks on our side that are against it, and kind of just lay everything out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for the listeners, the legislature has hundreds of bills, and they cannot all be experts on everything, so they need information to make decisions. And a lot of times bills are dropped, and you don't even hear about them for a while because you're in the House, and then there's bills in the Senate, and you might be asked about a bill in the Senate, and you're like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I've never heard of this, because the Senate is dealing with their bills, the House is dealing with their bills, and you have committees in both of the houses too. So hundreds of bills. You can't know everything. So you need to really do your research before you make major appropriations like this.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, Dave. It's something that, we're well over 400 bills now, and it's something where I won't see a good chunk of any of those bills. They'll probably die. So it's, for those listening out there, it's, if you see a certain bill online, again, I might not even see it. There's a lot of ideas brewing out there. So
that's fair. I mean, I've gone to Cracker Barrel where someone asked about a particular bill, and the legislators are like, okay, and they look it up, and for the first time, looking at it. It's not a particularly good system for when in the Cracker Barrel, you're like trying to on the fly read a bill and trying to understand it and trying to have an opinion about something you just don't even know what it is. So.
Yep, not a good opportunity to give proper feedback, that's for sure.
Anything else you'd like to talk about? What's the temper in Pierre? How are things going? Is there any final thoughts you might like to have?
We came out of the gate pretty hot with those ESA bills. Tensions were high right away. I think things have settled down a little bit, and I think there's an overall consensus, whether it's a progressive Republican or an actual, a true staunch traditional Republican, there's an agreement that, hey, we need to fix these property taxes, and I think people are coming together on that. There's some positive stuff coming out. There's going to be some other bills that come up that, whether they're gun rights bills, pro-life type of bills, things, the folks that are listening to this podcast, other things that you guys care about, there are other bills out there right now that touch on those things. It's just they're not the top three in the public right now, so they really don't get blasted out in the media and that type of thing. But I think this is going to be a solid session, and it's interesting to me in a good way because it's our 100th legislative session. We have some pretty darn solid leadership in both the Senate and the House, so it's shaping up to be pretty good.
Just as an observation, it's funny from a historical point of view is that property rights is a major issue in the legislature now, just like it was 250 years ago when we founded the Republic.
That's right.
It seems to be the same one thing that the government has to be involved with, and that's the most important thing to people, and to freedom and to the liberty of the individual. Well, Aaron, do you have any final thoughts?
Well, I was just going to say, just to your point there, I think it is, there's a good chunk of us out here that property rights, if you want to call it a battle, or property rights advocates out here. To your point, I mean, a lot of us, do our best to study history, and we know that we're not perfect, but that was the important thing to the founders of this country, of this state, and it's nice to see a good chunk of folks get elected in that past primary in general that truly care about that stuff. And even though tensions get high at times, I think some good things are going to come out of this. So I'll leave you with that, Dave.
Thank you. This has been the Making Waves podcast. My name is Dave Rhoden. We've been here with Aaron Aylward, representative from District 6 and a leader of the Freedom Caucus of South Dakota.